A shiny bracelet. My sister Ann and I, reminiscing about our youth and the days attending Delta Theta Tau School in Knott County, Ann recalled the time she spotted something shiny sticking out of the ground at the school playground. Using a stick, she dug out a pretty shiny bracelet. A little later, Ann laid the bracelet down to do something, but when she went to pick it back up, it was gone. That evening, while riding home on the school bus, it so happened that Ann peeped inside a gallon jug belonging to her friend and saw the bracelet. Ann's friend had snatched the bracelet while she wasn't looking. Ann asked her friend to give back the bracelet, but the girl claimed it and refused to give it back. After getting off the school bus, Ann's friend took off running toward home, with Ann right after her. The two girls began fighting, and someone yelled, "Kick her to the straddle, Ann." So Ann kicked her, but she wasn't prepared for what happened next. The girl returned the favor and kicked Ann right back where it hurts. Ann said that was a very painful knee to the groin, but she refused to cry. The other girl's mama came out of their house and put a stop to the fight. Ann said the following day she got a whipping over the incident after the other girl's mother saw our mom walking out of the holler and told her what had happened. Carr Creek Hollow. Eventually, our family moved from the cabin we owned on Deadman's Branch to a rented house on Carr Creek Hollow. I enjoyed living on Carr Creek Hollow because there were so many places for a kid to explore. Soon we made friends with some neighbors down the road who had a little girl close to my age, and we played together a lot. Sometimes my parents would go down and visit her parents in the evening, and their kids began coming to our house almost every day after school. Soon my sister Mary began dating their oldest son, named Marvin, and he would come to see her almost every day. One hot summer evening when we were all gathered round, a friendly water fight commenced, and soon everybody joined in, even Mom, which was unusual. We filled buckets, dishpans, and just anything we could find that would hold water, and dashed it on the first person we saw. We had lots of fun while living there. Knock 'em out Alfred. Once when I was about 6 or 7 years old, my brother Alfred decided to knock some apples out of Daddy and Mommy's sweet apple tree. Alfred was dangerous when he had a rock in his hand. The tree was located down by the well box out of sight of the house. As we approached the tree, Alfred told all of us to stand out of the way because he was going to throw rocks up into the tree. I remember darting out towards the tree about the time the rock hit a limb and ricocheted, smacking me right in the center of my forehead, cutting a deep gash. Blood was pouring from my head, but all I could think of was the awful whipping my brother was going to get for hitting me. I remember Alfred crying as he picked me up and carried me home. As soon as we entered the front door, I started begging Daddy not to whip Alfred because it was all my fault. I wasn't the only one Alfred conked on the head with a rock. He also hit my sister Sharon and cut a hole in her head. It was the day my family had moved to Switzer House on Steer Fork of Pigman's Branch. Mom warned Alfred and Sharon to stay away from the apple tree across the bottom, but they wanted some of those juicy apples and sneaked over there anyway. Alfred tried to knock some of the bigger apples out of the tree with a rock and hit Sharon in the head instead. Sharon was 3 years old at the time, and Mom whipped them both for disobeying her. A sack of rocks. Once Daddy bought a ton of block coal to burn in the fireplace. There was no road leading to our house, so Daddy had the coal dumped at the foot of the hill below Columbus Park's house. Every morning on the way out of the holler to work, Daddy would fill a sack with the coal so it would be ready for him to carry home in the evening. One day after Daddy had filled the sack with coal and went on to work, a neighbor came by and dumped the coal out of the sack and filled it with rocks. That evening, as usual, Daddy picked up the sack and carried it home. Later, when Daddy opened the sack to put coal on the fireplace, he discovered that the sack was full of rocks instead of coal. That was one of the few times that Daddy had been heard to cuss. There was no coal for the fire. What a mean trick to play on someone. Our house burns. It was Friday, October the 15th, 1965, and I had just turned 8 years old. My family was living on Car Creek Hollow in Knott County, Kentucky, and my sister Ann and I were down at a neighbor's house playing with their little girl. Suddenly we looked up the road and saw smoke and flames coming from our house. We went screaming toward home, and by the time we arrived, the house was fully engulfed in flames. I remember hearing my little brother Dale crying and saying, "Oh, Mommy, my peaches, my peaches." Mom had canned a lot of peaches and berries that year, and those canned peaches were Dale's favorite, and still are to this day. There was no saving our home and all our belongings inside. We lost everything except the clothes on our backs. I was in shock. The fire had happened so quickly. One moment we had a home, and the next it was gone. Some of us kids had to stay with relatives until our parents could find a place for us to live. I became very homesick and hated being away from my family. After a few days, Mom and Dad came and took us back to the old cabin we owned on Deadman Branch. I was so happy to be back with my family I didn't even mind living in that old log cabin. A few days later, we learned the cause of the fire. My 15-year-old sister, Mary Jane, was cooking supper and had put a greased cast iron skillet on a hot burner of the stove. Somehow, someone called for her from the living room, and she walked off, leaving the pan of grease unattended. By the time she remembered the skillet, it was too late. The whole kitchen was in flames. No fun with a cut foot. When I was about 10 years old, we lived at Sassafras near Vico in Perry County. I loved to play in the sandbar down by the creek near our house. I recall one particular day I was running barefoot in the sand with my brother Dale's dog named Tippy. Immediately I felt a sharp pain in my foot, and when I looked down there was blood pouring from my foot. Then I realized that I had stepped on a sharp metal lunch meat can that was buried in the sand. The can had cut a large gash in my foot, and blood was pouring out. It was late in the evening, and the doctor's office had already closed. After a while the bleeding finally stopped, but by the next morning my foot was badly swollen and throbbing with fever. My mother helped me get ready, and we headed out to see the doctor. I had to hop on one foot from Sassafras to the doctor's office in Vico because we didn't have a car. I remember the doctor squeezing my foot and how bad it hurt. I didn't cry out, but Mommy saw the tears in my eyes, and I suppose she had to say something to the doctor because she blurted out, "Confound it, you don't have to squeeze that youngin's foot so hard." And the doctor visit was over. I had to hop all the way back home. A few days later, my Uncle Troy came to visit from North Carolina. Troy and my brothers and sisters all went down to the creek to swim and play in the water. There was a huge swimming hole with a big rock that was used to dive and jump off into the water. Oh, how I wanted to get into the water and play with them because they were having so much fun. But Mommy said no because my foot would get infected. So there I sat on the creek bank with one foot in the water and the other in the sand. The house with the big stairs. At some point we moved down the road a little ways to a two-story house with upstairs. We kids got the upstairs bedrooms while Daddy and Mommy took a bedroom downstairs. It was at that time that our young cousin came to stay with us. This little girl would be sharing the room with Ann and me. At first this sounded exciting. Ann and I were both pleased at the thought of having our little cousin sharing the room with us. But that didn't last long. Slowly we began to realize that little cuz could do no wrong. It didn't matter what she did. No punishment ever came her way. Once she even put marbles in the commode and stopped it up. Still nothing. Dale, the TV news anchor. One day while we kids were playing upstairs on an old trunk that Mommy kept quilts in, our brother Dale was acting like Walter Cronkite telling the 6 o'clock news. We were having a lot of fun using old trunk as a stage. For some reason, little Cuz got upset at Dale and called him a bad name. That caught us all by surprise and was so hilarious. Dale flew mad as an old setting hen and went running downstairs to tell Mommy what Cuz had done. But as usual, it fell on deaf ears. Not even Dale could get any results in the family court of law against the Queen. Well, little Cuz did get a mild scolding. The gang. While living in the big house with the stairs, my older brother Alfred got into a racket with some neighborhood boys. These boys had formed a smart gang and were known for getting into some mischief around the area. That evening at dark, a rock came crashing through our living room window. Daddy immediately took action. He sent us kids upstairs and told us not to come down until he told us to. Dad then got his shotgun and went outside into the backyard and shot up into the air, hoping to scare them. It worked. Those boys took off running and we never had any more trouble out of them. $5 worth of candy. While living at Sassafras, Kentucky, my sister Ann, Brother Dale and I were playing around the railroad tracks near where we lived. There was a big tree near the tracks that was perfect for climbing, and we loved playing in that tree. One day we walked out to the railroad tracks and found a man lying on the ground underneath their play tree. He was drinking liquor. The man had a wooden leg and smelled weird. He tried to hide his bottle of booze from us kids, but we knew what he was doing. The man offered to buy us kids some candy if Ann would stay there with him while Dale and I went to the store and got the candy. That sounded great to Dale and me, so we grabbed the $5 and headed for the store. A few minutes later, Ann came running up behind us. She either didn't agree with our plan or something had happened to change her mind, but either way, she was going to the store with us. We bought a big bag full of candy with that $5, and it was a long time before we ventured back out to the railroad tracks again. Another time while we were playing out at the railroad tracks, we heard beautiful singing coming from a group of Catholic nuns that were walking down the tracks. The nuns were dressed in black garments with white veils on their head. We had never seen a sight like that before, so we followed them for a distance, listening to their beautiful choir-like singing. Later, we told our parents about the singing nuns. Dad was upset with us and said if we ever did that again, we would be in for a whipping. Bologna sandwich and a cold RC. One of my most cherished memories was when we were living in Sassafras, Kentucky. On a hot summer day, would start throwing hints to Mom. Boy, a bologna sandwich and a good cold bop would sure go good right now. All of us kids would then chime in with, "Please, Mommy, Daddy's right. It would sure taste good." We had to go through Mommy if we wanted anything from the store because she took care of the family finances. Mom supervised any money we had and saw the bills were paid. After all joined forces, Mom would usually give in to our requests. Sometimes we kids would put Daddy up to ask Mommy for something we wanted. Our chances of getting it was a lot better then. There was a little store just down the road, a short distance from our house, and it wouldn't be long before we would be eating bologna sandwich and drinking a cold RC. There's nothing like a bologna sandwich and a cold RC. The three old ladies that lived across the road from us, I think they were sisters. Mommy agreed to save our food scraps for them to give to their hogs. Every 2 or 3 days, I would take a small bucket full of scraps over to them and they would give me a quarter. One of the ladies was very skinny and smoked a pipe, and another was very sick. The other lady was a bit of a tattletale.